now. Okay, I'd like to thank LT News for inviting me today to talk to you about a topic that will be, I think, with us for a very long time, and that is how to adapt, especially reading materials for the online classroom. And the reason I'm saying that it will be with us for a long time is that yesterday I was having a discussion on that with some colleagues, and it was unanimous that even if we go back to our classrooms as we were before all this happened, we will still be needing to have some materials online. And This presentations today, I think, will be of help even if we go back to our classrooms. So what I'm going to talk to you about today, first of all, we will start with a very brief discussion of what are the differences between the online and the traditional classroom. And this is important in order to get you into the mind frame of how we think about reading materials for the online classroom. We're going to briefly talk about asynchronous and synchronous materials. What are the differences? And I chose to include that because, as I said, even when we go back to our classrooms, we will need online materials, which means that we will need asynchronous, if not synchronous, materials. So we'll see the differences. And of course, the main part of the presentation, the reading materials. And we will start with some considerations for fitting them onto the online classroom and how to adapt them. And in the how to adapt them, I will be quite practical. I will give you some practical tips, and I will also show you some steps that you can follow when you adapt the reading materials. So what are the differences between the online and the traditional classroom? Well, first of all, the interaction is quite different because of the screen, which can be a hindrance to interaction, not only between the teacher and the learner, but also among the learners themselves. Then, we're very used to using parent group work in our classes, but in the online classroom, that can change. And we'll see a little bit when we talk about the reading materials, exactly how this is done. Now, studies have actually have already asked students what were some problems that they encountered when in the online classroom. And the first one concerns speaking. They said that they didn't have the chance to practice it extensively because they didn't have their peers around them. The second one, boredom, reduced motivation. I'm sure that you've seen it already in your online classrooms. Of course, we did have that in the traditional classroom as well, but now the screen makes it a little bit harder on our students, especially if you're teaching young learners. I'm teaching adults, so it is a little bit better because they're more used to the screen, but still, even with adults, this can be a huge problem. Then the difficulty in disciplining themselves, and even that's even true for adults. I see it with my students. Because you're at home, you work on your own, you don't have a set schedule. And the difficulty in getting sometimes instant answers to the questions from the teacher. This is what the students reported. Now, some differences between asynchronous and synchronous materials, or if you wish, what are they? The asynchronous online materials are materials that we upload on a platform. We're going to be mentioning platforms a little bit later. And the students actually work on them at their own time, their own pace. So it's not happening in real time. And these materials should be guiding the students through pre-tasks, the target language, what is the target language of the specific unit or part, and be able to help them consolidate the material. Now, in asynchronous materials, what we can use for interaction is discussion boards or forums, and the platforms do offer that. And this is one new way of actually including peer or group work in our classes. And you know that we've got the breakout rooms and we've got the discussion boards and the forums, and this is where all the interaction, especially the learner-learner interaction, happens. Now, the asynchronous materials are best suited for teenagers and adults because they do need some level of maturity to be dealt with, but they could also work with young learners. It's not a no-no for them. Now, asynchronous materials can be used asynchronous as well, okay? So that's why it is very important to actually have them, especially if you're using a platform, which I guess you are. Now, some examples of asynchronous materials. First of all, PowerPoint for grammar, for videos that have accompanying exercises and everything. And this is for most of us new because we didn't used to use PowerPoints. Now, interactive exercises, there are many on the internet that you can actually embed onto your materials, and these exercises can also help the students with self-correction. Videos of authentic language accompanied by an online dictionary for vocabulary practice, and we'll talk about this a lot more when we actually come to the reading part. Downloadable video and audio scripts, discussion forums, and we go to the synchronous now online materials. As you will see, we said that they can be, the asynchronous can be used asynchronous, or they can be combined. And in the synchronous, we've got materials used within the online classroom in real time. Some of them can actually be the asynchronous that we will have already prepared. They can be combined with asynchronous materials, or they can stand on their own, depends. But they do have differences in development if you are to develop materials. Now, some examples. PowerPoints again, especially for the presentation of grammar. Text-based material enriched with multimedia elements such as visuals. We'll be talking a lot about that later on. But the most basic thing that concerns the online classroom, and especially the adaptation of materials for it, is to train the students. That is very important because they haven't been used to using online materials. They haven't been used to using platforms. So tutorials are of the essence, really. We all have to devote some time to showing them how they can actually navigate through platforms, through all the materials that we have prepared. Unless we do that, there's no point in using them. So very, very important. Now, let's go to the main part of this presentation, the reading materials. In my opinion, that's the hardest thing to fit to the online classroom, because we're dealing with texts and we're dealing with online reading, and this can really be tricky. It's much easier watching a video online than reading a text. And I mean, I've been working with platforms and students having to read loads and loads of pages. Students do have a problem, especially some of them, they cannot easily read from the screen. So the main considerations, first of all, the interactivity. We said that interaction is quite different in the online classroom. So when we adopt the coursebook materials, the reading coursebook materials, we have to think to ourselves, what sort of chances am I going to give to my learners to use the language actively, get instant feedback, so interact not only with the teacher, but with their peers as well. Then, flexibility. Of course, materials have to be flexible, online ones even more so, because they have to be easier to use for learners, because learners can be hindered by the technological, let's say, difficulties. So they have to be even more flexible. Content appropriateness, which means that materials should be easily understood and, of course, meet the needs of learners. Effectiveness, which means that they have to reach the goals, the objectives that we set for that particular lesson. And of course, attractiveness. Now, here is where online materials actually can have an advantage, because they can be made to be more attractive than printed ones. And of course, especially the last three, if not all five, apply to traditional materials as well. But they're to be viewed a little bit differently when it comes to online materials. So, some more considerations now for fitting reading materials. First of all, they have to be easily learned autonomously by the learners. And the content must include not only the materials, but also how to use them. I'm going back to what I said before. We have to train our students in using them. Okay. For example, many course books have already adopted their materials for online use, but I've looked at some of them. Not all, they haven't all done it successfully, because they cannot be viewed autonomously. They still present some difficulties when it comes to how they are presented on screen. So we have to remember that they have to be autonomous, especially if they are asynchronous, and we have to teach our students how to use them. Now, we've got, when it comes to presenting reading materials, and not only reading materials in an online form, we've got two types. The one is the linear form, the linear type. And this is where the learner has to do one thing first and then move to the next level, which means that the software itself will not let the student go to the next task, to the next bit, without completing the previous one. The second time is the branching. This is where students are more autonomous and they can skip a task, they can go to another part of the lesson, they can come back to something they have forgotten, etc. Now, after selecting the material, suitable software should be chosen. Of course, we don't develop them. We are going to adapt them from the course book, but we still need some software to do that. And by software, mainly here, I refer to the platforms. And there are many platforms. Some of them are for free. Some of them you have to pay something to use, but we cannot function without a platform anymore. And do not forget that even when we go back to our classrooms, what we have seen so far is that the platforms do help, even the traditional classroom. And which platform we're going to use depends on the needs of our students and on our needs, but definitely we have to choose which ones to use very carefully, be trained in them, and train our students also. Apart from that, if we are to adapt the readings from the course book for online use, we have to also consider some software, some other software. Like, for example, there is software, unfortunately not for free, that can help us adapt the tasks or the reading itself, or add to the reading some things that we're going to see in a minute. So software considerations definitely there. Now, tasks that can stimulate learner-learner or learner-computer interaction. So they have to be computer friendly, so that learners can do them without having to click on many buttons or do very complicated things, especially for those of you who teach young learners. Believe me, even my adult students have problems with that. And when I tell them, but you're in front of a screen with Facebook and everything all the time, and they go, yeah, I can handle Facebook, but not the platform. So definitely they have to be user-friendly. Now, some practical considerations now when adapting reading materials for the online classroom. First of all, and very important, the visuals. Of course, we have them in the course book as well, but for the screen, that's even more important. We have to enrich them, and we can actually do that with multimedia elements. This is the great thing about adapting reading materials for online use. We can sky's the limit with the multimedia elements that we can use. Now, hyperlinks, very important, and this is something that can actually help us a lot. You've got the reading, okay, you can actually add a hyperlink, for example, for a word that you believe is not known to your students, and this hyperlink can actually take them to a dictionary entry that will show them the meaning, synonyms, examples. So this is great because as students read the text, they will just click on the hyperlink and they will have everything ready there. And you've got to do that. It's a great thing to have when it comes to online use. We couldn't have it in the traditional classroom. And you can actually have hyperlinks not only for words or phrases or chunks. You can also have video or audio components. For example, let's say that in a reading, a historical event is mentioned. So what you can have is a very short video explaining that one. That will make it more interesting for the students. They will play around with the hyperlinks, and it will also help you explain fewer things, whether whether these materials are synchronous or asynchronous. So hyperlinks are very important. Then links to other sources for supporting the content in their material. For example, if you've got a reading on global warming, you can have links to some more information about global warming. And you can actually, what I have done it in the past when I was teaching teenagers and they loved it. I actually included the links, and they use the links to come up with a short presentation on the topic, which was, I remember, global warming. So you can do lots more things with these links to outer sources. Then you can also embed websites with activities like the ones I told you about, the interactive ones that are also self-corrected. So students can also work with them asynchronously. So web activities, videos, exercises, learning objects, anything, sky's the limit really, with what you can actually integrate to make it more interesting. Now, some practical tips that have to do with on-screen reading. As I mentioned before, this is the number one problem with adapting readings for the screen. We don't all read from the screen with the same ease. Okay. Now, first of all, the pages, they need to be organized into meaningful, self-contained chunks that do not spread onto the next page. Because when you've got the printed course book, you can turn the page quite easily. But here, if you've got a longer reading, it has to be divided into screens that are like, you cannot end a screen with a comma. It has to end when the paragraph ends. You have to be you've got to have a whole paragraph or a couple of paragraphs, which means you've got to divide the reading in multiple screens. And this will help the students read it more easily, and take advantage of all the hyperlinks that you're going to put. Now, use images. I said before, visuals are very important. You can actually have even your hyperlinks or two images. For example, let's say that you've got the word, I don't know, chair, and your students do not know what a chair is. You actually have a hyperlink to an image that shows a chair. Or on the page itself, you can have like pictures that show what the main topic of this paragraph or the couple of paragraphs on that particular screen are all about. Something that I forgot to say, don't overuse them, of course. We all know that images should not take the burden of actually explaining the reading. They still have to do the reading, so be careful a little bit with it. Now, bookmarks, very important. If a student starts reading a text in a printed book, they can make a mark of how far they have read. They cannot do that on the screen. So you've got to make them, you have to make them able to use bookmarks so they can keep track of where they are in the material. Help and hint buttons. And you have trained your students in using online materials and navigating through them, but some help and hint buttons are not a bad idea. And actually, it's not only to help them navigate the online materials, it can actually help them in actual tasks. Like, you've got the hint button, you've got a grammar exercise, let's say tenses. Put verbs in the right tense, because the reading is dealing with, let's say, past tenses. You can have some hints to the grammatical phenomenon to help them fill it in with the correct tense. Now, use colors to highlight main points in the actual reading. And this cannot be done in the printed course book, but it can be done in the online one. So you actually, for example, if you want to work on topic sentences and or help them or work on summaries from a reading, you actually can highlight the main points and they can actually take it from there to develop their summary. Use icons that help learners to visualize and recall recurrent information. Again, going back to visuals. Now, what are the steps for adapting the course book for the online classroom? The first one is to choose the reading from the course book, unless you have to include everything in the same order it goes into the book. If you are able to choose it, make it more interesting, because remember, the main problem is reduced motivation. You don't want that. So what you can do is choose readings that talk about real people doing real things and in real places, with striking image, the wow factor, new angles and fresh twists on topics, and humor. So we all know that a printed course book can have great readings or not so great readings. And even if the reading is not that great, you can make it so, because you can actually change it a little bit. But let's go to the second step, because I believe that most of you will not choose the text. The texts are given. So how can we adapt them? First of all, don't forget online viewing, the reading from the screen. So definitely you have to fit it. As we said, screen by screen, paragraphs should not be going on from one screen to the next. It should be presented as a whole. So in order to be able to do that, you've got to split it in parts, logical parts. And sometimes for screen use, you've got to decrease the number of words because it's not, even if you split it in screens, it is demotivating for a student to know that he or she will have to read 3 or 4 screens in order to get to the end of the reading. So actually decreasing the number of words is not an altogether bad idea. Now, the third step, now you've got to support your text. We've already mentioned some of the things you can do. Just to summarize them here, first of all, you can have links to websites, videos, additional information, like I told you before. Hyperlinks for vocabulary, in my opinion, is a must, and one of the greatest things to get the boredom out of the way of actually, miss, Mr., sir, what is the meaning of that word, etc., etc. You can even have hyperlinks to a Greek dictionary if you are using Greek in your classroom. And of course, visuals. You can do loads of things with visuals and not be like limited to the visuals that the course book offers. Now, that was for the reading itself. What about pre and post reading tasks? When adapting them, you must consider some things. For example, you of course know that we always have a leading activity. We can have it here as well. And it can be based on visuals, or it can be based on an embedded video, which means that the leading activity online can be more imaginative than in a printed book. Additional visuals, not only the ones from the course book, or even, as I said, embedded videos. And the title, what we can do, okay, when you've got the printed course book and you're doing the leading activity, the students do have access visually to the whole text. But you can avoid that when online, which means that in the leading activity, of course, we ask them to read the title and start guessing what the text is all about. And what do? They actually look a little bit at the topic sentences of the text just to make their guesses safer. Here, you can just pop in the title and they cannot see the reading. So your guesswork, your leading activity is more real. And what you can actually do, because remember, pair and group work in the online classroom definitely have definitely changed, but you still can have that. You can use breakout rooms or discussion forums. So for example, you just show them the title and then you send them to their breakout rooms and they are to think about the title and start guessing what the text will be all about. And what happens with the post-reading tasks? First of all, you have to use the linear type. If you remember, the linear type means that the Students do one task first, and then they go to the next, to the next, to the next. Because if you don't do that, especially with younger learners, you will have learners jumping to an activity that they shouldn't be doing yet because they have to do one other first. So you've got to have the linear type when it comes to comprehension tasks. And it's better to use true, false, or multiple choice rather than open questions. But you can use open questions in discussion forums or breakout rooms instead of having them write them out. Okay, again, do pair work or group work in breakout rooms for open questions. Now, the vocabulary tasks. One thing is that with hyperlinks, it's going to go a lot faster because they will have the hyperlinks. And first of all, when you develop your vocabulary tasks, you have to remember that they have to be able to have access to the hyperlink. So in the vocabulary tasks, again, you've got to include the hyperlinks to the explanations. And again, for the vocabulary tasks, the linear type, which means they do one first and then the next one. Multiple choice or filling activities are better because it's easier to do online. And again, hyperlinks, put them in the exercise as well, so they don't have to go back to the reading because that would be a little bit difficult. Now, let me just wrap it up with some websites that can help you. Now, I have included here some websites, but they're not all for reading. I thought of actually including some websites in general that can help you in general. So you've got Cambridge has developed a lot. Cambridge English has developed a lot of things on synchronous and asynchronous materials. There are online. There's Quizlet. Many of you might know about it. You can come up with some quizzes, especially for grammar. You've got Vocaroo. What Vocaroo can do is that your students can record themselves and they can send you the audio. Macmillan Dictionary is online. Cambridge also is online. So you can use them for the hyperlinks in the text. British Council, loads of things, especially for videos that you can embed in your readings. There's also this George online, where you can create closed activities. Kahoot, many of you know about it, where you can actually create interactive exercises. You can also create exercises on your readings, for example, since we're talking about readings. These are just a few of my references, and that's about it. I would like to thank